Pull the blanket a little closer. Let your shoulders soften. Breathe slowly, evenly. As you read, imagine a thin current of air winding between the letters. Imagine the space between sentences widening into a quiet place where thoughts stroll without hurry. This story will not rush, and neither will you. Every paragraph is a breath. Every image, a soft note played in the dark. Night had only just laid itself across the fjords, and the water was so smooth it looked poured from glass. A scout longship, slender and light, drifted without sound. At the prow a carved dragon head rested, not menacing, more like a creature long tired of frightening anything, happy now to lean into the cool attention of the stars. Eirik, the scout, stood by the steering oar. He was not old, but his eyes held a careful, quiet attention that felt older than years. He knew how to listen to water, how to separate the true voice of wind from the gossip of rock. On both sides of the fjord, black cliffs rose like two patient shoulders, and between them, the ship and its crew slid forward with a feeling of being gently seen. Ropes murmured in their fibers. Near the stern lay a small harp wrapped in deerskin, Asa's harp. Asa was the vulva of their people, a seer whose words were rare, and whose music traveled farther than any longship. She did not speak loudly, she did not need to. Along the northern rim of the sky, a pale motion began, the Aurora, the slow dance that sometimes starts as if someone nudged a curtain at the far edge of the world. Green and violet threads wove themselves together, first shyly, then with a braver hand, never brash. Eirik did not order the oars shipped. There was no need. Tide and mountain had found a quiet agreement. The water carried them. Thoughtful. "Do you hear it?" Asa asked, fingertips resting on the harp frame as if reading by touch. Grumbling. "Hear what?" Sigmund grumbled from a drowse, eldest of the oarsmen. Pensive. In the silence there's a tone, deep, like a mountain's stomach, as if we're moving towards something. Eirik heard it too, not sound in any ordinary sense, but a vibration spreading across the chest. Peaceful. The way a pine forest feels when you're still enough to sense the slow pulse in the trees. The aurora brightened by a shade. Among its threads appeared pinpoints of silver, like beads pressed into cloth. The beads pulsed, faint but steady. They were not stars. Stars keep their patience and do not ask where you are going. These points asked. Their question was gentle, like a stream speaking to the stones it polishes. Eirik kept his hand on the steering oar and did not move it. The ship did not turn. The water guided, or perhaps the lights above did. Asa flattened one palm on the harp, and the gut string yielded with a tiny creak. She did not play, she touched, and even that quiet contact felt like an answer. The vibration overhead thinned and clarified, as if both tones, ship and sky, were searching for the same key. A good sign, Asa whispered. Visitors. Fear did not stir. Vikings had seen too many things to be surprised at the world's variety. Winters bright as bear fur, sudden springs, waves that rose not to drown but to teach caution. They learned to notice the strangest events as part of the everyday. If the sky wanted to speak, it was enough to listen and not demand a lesson. The silver beads unfolded slowly into discs. Their silver wasn't metallic, but like the wet shimmer of river stones under a bending moon. They sank closer to the mouth of the fjord until the mirror beneath them took note. Each disc had its twin below, a reversed circle opening in the dark. Between the two, as if strings had been drawn taut and silent, the vibration refined itself, like a musician testing and retesting until a chord lay true. Softly, runes, Eirik said softly. They're forming runes. So they were. The discs arranged themselves into signs, the light bridges between them narrowing into lines. One shape was Algiz, protection, like two raised branches around a center trunk, two open hands asking blessing of earth and sky. Another was Raido, journey, promise of motion in rhythm. And there was Berkano, new growth, new beginnings. Nothing hurried, nothing pressed. Sigmund crouched closer to Eirik. Chuckles, if I tell this to the young ones, they'll say the beer had a bad batch. No need to tell it, Eirik said, not smiling but gentle. They'll see it when it's time. The longship drifted. Beneath her the fjord kept its secrets. Fish were elsewhere, or maybe they too were listening to the underwater version of the same prayer. The Aurora rested, then swam again, like breath. The first being appeared then. It did not step onto the ship, and it did not hang in air. It simply was, at the edge of the deck, beside a coil of rope, just where wood met water. Its outline was soft, not bounded by skin so much as by a faint, luminous mist. It was not frightening and not exotic. It felt familiar in the oldest sense, like something that had always been present on nights when anyone was quiet enough to notice. It did not speak, but when Ausa turned toward her harp, call it the guest, inclined the faintest degree, an attentive tilt. Ausa plucked one low, tender note. The guest changed. It did not approach. The light traveled through it. Tiny, luminous motes moved within, like starfish swimming in an invisible sea. No hand went to any weapon. Silence held, but not the silence of fear, the silence of respect and joy. What does it want? Sigmund murmured. Perhaps nothing, Eirik answered. Perhaps it's only showing that it's here, like wind that ruffles the water to say hello, and then smooths it again. The guest lifted its attention toward the sky, at least that is how it felt, and the discs shifted. The runes rebalanced, lines met and parted, distances altered. It was not a message the way people use symbols. It was a shared breath, something you could fall into without questions. The ship glided into a broad bay. Cliffs leaned back, water rested even more deeply. Eirik raised a hand. They would stop here. The ship slowed, as if water had been made into soft hands. Ausa set down her harp. Through the timbers, the hull carried a faint hum into her palm. Rest, she said. There is nothing to do. The guests know silence. The men lay down. Not military order, but the ease children feel when the day has been kind. Hides and wool, carved amulets and rough-woven blankets, all looked as if they too were ready for sleep. Above, the discs held their protective shapes. The Aurora seemed to shine not from sky, but from the fjord's floor, tinting the black with green. The guests stayed, not motionless, not busy, like a good coal in a good fire. Sometimes it glowed, sometimes it banked, always it kept. Eirik closed his eyes, and a vision found him, not pushy, not loud, the kind of dream that comes in the Longhouse, where heat has ripened the air. He saw mountains from above, the way people rarely do. Fjords became threads of silver braided through black stone, holding the fabric of the world in place. 1,000 lights, 1,000 echoes, the Aurora an enormous slow harp, each ribbon of light a string played by wind and sea together. He saw also that the guests had not only arrived that night, they had always been. The old patterns in fog, the rhythm of ice fracturing, the paths birds sketch in air, all belonged to the same patient music. Sometimes the guests came closer, sometimes they stayed at the rim. People sometimes noticed, and sometimes mistook them for weather. It did not matter. The song remained. Ausa crouched at the gunwale and took 3 twigs from a pouch, pine, birch, and juniper. She did not burn them. She touched them. The pine carried the taste of mountain, the birch sifted light, the juniper, the kindness of a long winter. She breathed toward the guest. Something in the light, the faintest motion, answered, like fog giving a blush to the first hint of sunrise. Thoughtful. If they asked, what would you say? Eirik asked Ausa.
That everything is all right, she smiled. That silence is enough. If we need to understand, we will, but perhaps there is nothing here to solve, only to be together. Night deepened without darkening. The Aurora kept its green-violet shawl on the sky's shoulders. The discs kept their runes where they belonged. Breaths slowed. One by one, sleep anchored the crew, as if each chest launched a little hook into the mirror of water and tied itself to stillness. Eirik stayed awake a little longer. He had a question too quiet to become words. He could not ask it. He did not need to. His chest sent out a slow wave, like water nodding to shore. The guest turned toward him, or that's how it felt, and in the dragonhead's eye socket a seed of light appeared. No more than imagination, yet sure enough to let Eirik know he had been heard. There was no answer. In silence there are no answers. Silence only sits beside questions until they dissolve. Morning came as if poured from a high cup. Nothing was disturbed. Water remained smooth. Cliffs kept their gentle sternness. The guest lingered, dimmer in daylight. The discs climbed. The runes held one last moment against the pale blue, then melted, like frost on grass stepping into sun. "We go on," Eirik said. "As we did yesterday." "As we did yesterday," Ausa agreed, brushing a single string so the morning could hear it, so the day would know it was welcome. Days turned like even strokes of the oar. The men remembered the night not in talk but in movement. They lifted the oars with kinder hands, set them down more softly. There was mercy in their motions. The fjord replied. Birdsong thickened as if trunks themselves sang. The water's tiny spines softened when a salmon touched air. On the second night, the guests returned. Not in the same way, never the same way, but a little more shy, as if learning how to be modest in a human village. There were no discs at first, only pale vapor lines slipping along the edges of the mountains, ghosting their shapes in light. The lines breathed with the air. The ship settled between two cliffs, and the current forgot its hurry. Eirik sat midships with the steering oar held upright between his feet. Ausa bent over the harp, now drawing more notes, slow, blending scales without flourish, like roadside grasses, obvious and invisible depending on how fast you go. More guests came, 2, then 3, then 5, all the same soft radiance, all with floating star motes inside. They did not line up, they did not perform, yet the ship and everyone aboard fell into an easy choreography. Coils of rope took perfect arcs, oar timbers didn't complain, air lay against the skin like the pass of a fox's tail. "Let's try their names," Ausa whispered, "but not in our tongue." "How do you mean?" Sigmund asked. "Thank you for spending your evening with me. If you're still awake and would like more quiet stories, please subscribe to the channel. If you've already drifted off, just keep resting." Their names aren't made of sound, not even of light. They are made of motion. Repeat a motion in true silence long enough, and it almost becomes a name. So they watched, as each guest offered a faint, hovering curve, a greeting. The crew folded that rhythm into their own actions. They tucked blankets with that curve. They tapped the gunwale to the same meter. They stood with the same weight shift. The names were never spoken, but they were learned. Perhaps they had been known all along and only forgotten. At the deep middle of the night, something happened that deepened the silence itself. The guests hinted toward the water, not with hands, not with arms, but with a soft emphasis in their glow. And far below the hull, something began to shine. Not fire, not treasure, rather a great round stone, bright as if the calm of a very old day had been stored within. The stone did not move, the light did not flicker. It simply was, like the pulse of the fjord's bed. "I've heard of this," Asa breathed. "Old stones. They say some waters keep a heart, and sometimes they show it. Thoughtful. And what do we do with it?" Eirik asked. "Relaxed. Nothing," she said. "We let it beat." Between ship and stone, certain portions of water felt lighter, as if the body could find rest more easily there, and thought could set down its weight. In the men's dreams, slow meadows drifted by. Trees grew rings around time. Overhead, the guests, or stars, kept an invisible order. The old stone drew a quiet axis through the deep, as if the world's wheel had found a notch and settled perfectly on the next day. At dawn, the light returned to the bed. The guests swam the first hour of morning like dew, carrying sun across the ridgelines. The crew was refreshed in a simple way. No new plans, no grand resolve. Their shoulders felt easier. Their movements didn't grind. They came for a pebbled cove with a spring tucked among rocks above the fjord's mouth. Even in summer, the water there was cold and clean. People said whoever drank from it kept the order of their dreams. They arrived on the third night. Seaweeds moved under the shallows like transparent parts of silence. Among the pebbles, pyrite flashed like small stars seated just beneath the skin of water. The guests floated modestly. Above, there were no runes tonight. The discs unspooled into slow flower shapes invisible at first, their petals opening and closing within the Aurora's curtain. Asa went to the spring. The water didn't gush or spit. It flowed the way a life should, not abruptly, not briefly, but with the sense that it knows how long a good drink takes. She cupped one hand beneath, and a bead ran across her skin. The droplet flashed like fish scale, then went clear again, as if past and future had clicked together with a soft sound. Relaxed. "Let us drink," she said, passing the taste from palm to palm. No one spoke of what to ask of the spring. Such things are not asked. They are thanked in advance. When Eirik swallowed his last mouthful, he felt the water travel not only down his throat, but through him, pausing at corners as a guest inspecting a new house, nodding, satisfied. This cove was a particularly honest place for night. Mountain shadows rested. Owls flew like a hand passing over moss. The guests came closer than ever before. They didn't touch, but when they glided near a cheek or a shoulder, skin felt stroked by a strand of cool air, not shiver, refreshment. Asa took the harp and played, not melody, not song, colors, greens and violets that existed in sound. The Aurora answered with new shades. The lone disk above scarcely moved. Its change was inside it, the way an animal breathes when it is sleeping safely. Within the guests' bodies ran patterns unknown to human knowledge, yet known in the bones. Spirals of shell interiors, fracture maps of snowflakes, ratios hidden in a pine cone's whorl. Eirik noticed the men tracing those patterns unconsciously in the air with their fingers. The harp's notes lay softly across those invisible drawings. The names made from motion met and dissolved into one another, like streams meeting before the fjord. Then, as if someone long awaited had arrived at last without footfall, the guests gathered themselves a length from the ship. They did not gleam more. Their contours sharpened slightly. The star motes inside them slowed, all paying attention at once. Above the cove, a new sign unfolded. Not rune, not flower, a single breathing circle. It did not spin, it did not tremble. It inhaled, it exhaled, perfectly matched to the sleeping crew's breath, as if kindness were keeping time from far away. "That is their yes." Whispering. Asa whispered, her voice more rested than tired. "They ask nothing, they give nothing. They are here, and we are here." Eirik bowed his head. His thoughts settled like snowfall on a fir bough, layered, unhurried, complete. He remembered his grandfather, who, cleaning a fish by fire, once said, "The trouble with wonders is that people either lean too close or walk too fast." Eirik did neither. He did not ask who the guests were, whence they came, how long they would stay. Everything was true without questions. Before dawn, the guests thinned, not vanishing, just becoming fine as spider silk set free of dew. The petal shapes folded back into the Aurora's weave. The ship tipped a fraction, as if water sighed. Waves lifted and laid an after lullaby along the shore. Among the pebbles, Eirik saw a "Keep it," Asa said, as if she had heard too. "It isn't yours, but you can take care of it for a while." "And then?" Eirik asked. "Stones know when to go home."
Home did not shrink the fjords, and it did not lower the cliffs. Water stayed as cold and as cheerful as before. People looked the same as when they left, at least from the outside. Inside, something had shifted, and no one tried to hurry or name it. The motion the guests had taught lived quietly in shoulders and wrists and the corners of the eyes. Homecoming was not a shout or a drumbeat. It was a descent into a familiar, warm corner. In the Longhouse, they were welcomed as if they had only walked to the near edge of the pines, though they had watched the fjord's great silence several nights long. Families asked soft questions. How was the sky? Was there fog? Did you land a fish? Eirik said little because little was true. The sky danced, he said. The water heard. We were there. Ausa brought out her harp that evening. She told no tale. She didn't need to. The harp knew the arrangement, and the arrangement knew the people. They gathered by fire. The fire crackled as if the guests' star motes had come visiting. No exuberance, no display, only the quiet presence proper to a common table. Children hushed. Adults let their eyes settle into the embroidery of flames. Night slid down from the rafters, as patiently as ice loosens into melt. Eirik carried the little stone in his pocket. He didn't show it around. Sometimes, fetching water from the river, he paused to let it rest in his palm. He asked nothing of it, and it promised nothing. The pulse was there, the old stone's heart made small. That was enough to gentler his movements. One evening, a boy from the village appeared by the shore. He was newly tall, and his eyes were so wide you wanted to step lighter when he looked your way. Eirik, he said, is it true there were signs in the sky? There are always signs in the sky, Eirik said. People call them stars. I mean other kinds. Yes. What did they say? That they were here. The boy was quiet, then nodded, as if that answer was exactly the shape of space he needed. He did not gape. He did not leap. He sat on the pebbles and watched the evening fog lay a scarf across the river. When he rose, Eirik placed the stone in his hand. Take care of it for a while, he said. It isn't yours. It isn't mine. It only likes to stay where motions are gentle. When should I bring it back? The stone will tell you, even if you forget to listen. Children understand such things because they haven't yet been taught to forget silence. The boy carried the stone afterward. When friends teased him, show us its magic, the boy smiled to the rhythm of their teasing and remembered the motions, the nameless names. He lifted his hand, as if plucking an invisible harp string out of air. Without knowing why, the others' breathing slowed and their laughter softened. Winters came. Auroras returned. Not every night, not from the same direction. When the curtains hung over the Longhouse, they looked like heavy green wool cloaks. Blue and violet inks ran their own patterns near the hem. Occasionally the single disc showed again, but no one labeled it a marvel. It drifted like dandelion fluff in summer. It would be strange to call it foreign. Sometimes the guests swam near, sometimes they stayed back. Asa needed only one note to call a reply in the sky. A brief pattern formed then. No message to the ear, but a reassurance to the bones that everything was all right. No one clapped, no one fought about them. It was enough that they were noticed and given a seat in the silence when they came by. Eirik still walked to the fjord's edge now and then, alone or with the boy who kept the heartstone. They spoke little. Water's voice is delicate. One tries not to drown it out. Mountains knew them, and they knew the mountains, the kind of friendship that requires neither agreements nor shouts. On a spring evening, thin ice lay at the fjord's edge, the kind that rings if you look at it. Eirik and the boy felt the little stone grow warmer, not hot, just more alive than air. The boy stepped to the water without question, the way a foot finds an old song's beat, and threw the stone flat to skip. It struck twice, 3 times, 6, as if the fjord itself whispered thanks, then sank with the softest decision. The guests did not appear that night. The Aurora danced anyway, but from far away, like shy relatives watching a doorstep. The boy smiled. Eirik did too. They knew. Things do not need to happen in order to be present. Years followed without spectacle. They were made of work and sleep, thaws and freezes, arrivals and partings. People patched boats and wove baskets. Children were born. Elders closed their eyes. Trees rose and fell. Everything was as it often is, and within that, peculiarly itself. The guests saved their visits for the quietest nights, and then indicated, with the politest gestures, that sky and water were still conversing, and that any human who wished could sit at the edge of that conversation. Asa's harp split a little at the corners, which made its voice deeper, not weaker. Bone thickened in Irik's shoulders, and hurry thinned. The smallest sign became easy to sense, like a seabird predicting a change of wind. When the boy who had carried the stone grew to a man, he told his child, whose name could have been any name for the story's purposes, that once, when flowers of light opened above the village, he felt as if something vast and kind spoke to them. The child nodded and did not question. Children know when to listen further to a story that has already taken up residence in their head. One summer night, resin sweet in the air, and chalk-white moths circling over water, the disc returned. Irik did not go often to sea anymore, but the shore still fit him perfectly. The guest's motion had changed, not better, not prettier, only closer to the rhythm of a human heart. Runes showed again in brief flashes, but they approached from motion now, not from symbol, as if every sign must first be a movement. Thoughtful. "Do you see?" Irik asked his grandchild, who lined pebbles at his feet. Calm. "I see," the child said. It was enough. That night, the single disc made a slow ring around a narrow reach of fjord, as someone might set a hand on a friend's shoulder and say nothing. Water inside the circle smoothed past smooth. Birds did not startle. Cliffs did not grow darker. Somewhere a sleeper laughed, and somewhere else another woke at dawn feeling lighter for no particular reason. Irik slept more and more, as growing branches do late in summer, unobtrusively, inevitably. When the time came for his eyes to remain closed, the Aurora looked exactly as it had that first night, green and violet and silver, and the silence felt the same as when the guests drew near, and every person realized silence does not separate, it binds. Asa played the harp once more. She gave the silence a tone. It did not travel far. It didn't need to. It was enough that the rafters heard, that the village heart heard, and that the sky's lights stooped a little. The guests, whom no one ever managed to name in a way that would stay, were there. You didn't have to see them to know. The old stones did not shine. There was no need. The glow burned in everyone who had ever heard the harp, and in anyone who had stood at the fjord's edge and said to wind, "I see you." Dawn broke like the careful pouring of light from a bowl. The mountains drew back their shadows, leaving no emptiness, because memory had filled that space long ago. Day sounds rose, the bright touch of a water bucket, wool against tanned leather, a child's first tentative laugh. Over the fjord, light lay down in its ordinary way, without flourish, clean. Irik's memory did not leave. It didn't harden into an object for a pocket. It became water, present, a little everywhere. In the lift of a hand toward a harp, in the quiet sigh before a fire, in the way someone gazed across the fjord and asked no more than silence could answer. If a traveler asked, thoughtful, "Is it true that lights moved in your skies and many saw them?" someone would surely say, affirming, yes. If the traveler asked, curious, what did they want, a shrug might come, and the reply, casual, to be here. Most people never asked. Stay long enough, and you'll notice an unusually smooth patch of water, an unusually capable gesture, or an unusually well-made silence. Then there is no need for words. The fjord is the same still. Mountain shoulders keep the sky. The sky's shoulders keep the mountains. Sometimes green-violet shawls slide over the world and flowers of light open in the dark. Sometimes, very rarely, a single silver disk lingers along the hem of those shawls, circling a small piece of the world as if smoothing the edge of sleep. The water becomes smoother, the human heart more peaceful. If, on a night like that, someone stands on the shore and recognizes the nameless rhythm in their own movements, they can pluck the invisible harp line with a finger. With luck, the kind made of attention and patience, the world will answer not with a loud sign, but with the smallest nod. The smallest nod is enough. Enough for a day, enough for a night, enough to fall asleep. Now the story has reached the edge of the shore. Words, like small stones, can roll back into water one by one. Stay here a little longer. Listen to the silence where a string hums once more, and the aurora's faintest shade lingers behind your eyes. Breathe slowly, the way the fjord breathes. The guests ask nothing. Let your shoulders rest. Allow the world to hold you of its own accord, like water holding a ship on the night when everything was exactly where it belonged. Sleep well. Light will keep watch. Water will remember. Silence will answer. Good night. If your eyes are still open and you'd like more soothing stories, subscribe and softly ring the little bell. I'll whisper when a new episode arrives. For now, close your eyes. Good night.